What's up, everybody? I'm going to start off up in Turkey here at an ancient gate to the underworld. This is called the Plutonian at Hierapolis, dedicated to the god of the underworld, Pluto. And what's unique about this place is they would just lead the animals down in there for sacrifice, and the gods would take them. Cicero writes, any animal that passes inside meets instant demise. Bulls that are led into it fall and are dragged out. I threw in sparrows, and they immediately breathed their last and fell. The Plutonian is an opening of only moderate size, large enough to admit a man. It is full of vapor so misty and dense that one can scarcely see the ground. Now, this is next to all these hot springs and geothermal activity. So there's a cave emitting all these noxious fumes. So people saw this as a gate to hell, the underworld. And this became really famous in the ancient world. I'm not sure if the priests founded the city. It kind of sounds like they did, but it grew to be like 100,000 people strong and was a huge ancient tourist attraction. People would come and buy a sparrow. I guess on special occasions, they'd take a bull down there and you throw it down in the pit and you watch it croak. It's what they did on the weekends back in the day. This whole operation was ran by eunuch priests, and they would sell these animals and then go down in the pit as well and come out unscathed. They say that Strabo thought the priest's immunity may have been due to their castration. But today they say that the priests just held their breath or knew where pockets of oxygen were. And I don't think people of the ancient world would have just been fooled by somebody holding their breath, unless they did it like an exceptionally long 8 minutes or something. One theory is it was just carbon dioxide, which is heavier than air and would settle down in there. And the priests were up higher than the animals, so the animals would asphyxiate, and they're up above all the carbon dioxide. So this place was pretty popular in the ancient world. High society, emperors and the like would visit here, and it was written about several times, but they discovered it in 1965. It's right next to these huge travertine hot springs, and they didn't know it was there for hundreds of years. Strabo specifically mentions using these hot springs to dye textiles with. They even say Hierapolis became one of the most important centers of art, philosophy, and trade in the eastern part of the Roman Empire. So how do you lose a city right next to the hot springs? I mean, this huge amphitheater is here. This is a different place, but you see up top where somebody discovered a Greek amphitheater just sitting there. And I'm sure the locals just thought these were hills for hundreds of years. So what I've been thinking lately is that nonstop rain event for months on end just washed all the mountains down over the cities all across the Mediterranean. And the reason I think that over liquefaction is if these had just sunk down in a liquefaction event, you wouldn't have one level wall anywhere. It'd be like putting a Coke can in a bowl of oatmeal. It would fall over to the side. Don't underestimate the power of water. This was 2 days of nonstop rain during Hurricane Helene, and I've got several written records saying that this happened for a couple months. And speaking of it being possibly Mediterranean wide, this is the condition of the ancient city of, I'm going to say Yeezy, just because they're touchy about this. But what they say is the ancient city of Yeezy is buried under 15 feet of this rubble. Look at all those rocks, all the mud. They've built all these metal tunnels to support the modern city up above. They got stairs going up hills. Everything is buried. They're standing on the ancient paved street. And I swear, they must start teaching this in grade school for them. I've got 3 articles open right now, and 3 different writers repeat that this was destroyed because of a baseless hot red about 30 times. And being melodramatic, she plucks a piece of charcoal from the wall and smears it all over their arm. It says, "'Cause they want to burn us." That was seriously a tiny little piece of charcoal in that wall right there. And she says that's where the Romans burned and destroyed the city. So there are only 2 known sources that I know of on the destruction of Yeezy. Josephus, a gray and self-proclaimed best general in the world, and then the Arch of Titus, which I've covered many times, that just happens to look like all of the arches from the 16th century, not from the ancient Roman Empire, and where it looks like this frieze has been chiseled out of another location and installed here. That's pretty much all the record we have of what happened to ancient Yeezy. And then there's the city itself. The city was supposed to have been razed to the ground by the Romans, and evidently they spent a couple years with shovels and picks burying it. But then this is still standing. They call this Tower of David or Castle of David. And this doesn't appear to be a reconstruction. Usually you don't have roofs on the reconstructions because that's a lot of work. Now, let me give you the authorized version of history, and then we'll talk about whether this is even the right place. But King David was king for 40 years, and then King Solomon was king for 40 years, and then the kingdom broke apart under Solomon's sons. So they had a kingdom for 80 years tops, and now 2,000 years later, official dating, they are the rightful heirs of this land. You would think that there would be all kinds of artifacts and inscriptions from the original builders, but these are the top proofs that this city belonged to the ancient Yeezys. A 2,700-year-old fragment of a ceramic bowl that may contain the names of biblical figures, a stone inscription, a Hebrew seal, which is a tiny little artifact that wouldn't be hard to accidentally fall out of an archaeologist's pocket, the Siloam inscription, and an inscription on the walls of a mikveh. This is the Siloam inscription, discovered in a tunnel, which brings water from, allegedly, the Gihon spring to the pool of Siloam. This is literally graffiti in an aqueduct, and that's one of their big claims to fame. This is the stone inscription they were referring to, where you got 5 or 6 words scratched into the base of a column. So they built this big city and a huge temple, and to commemorate their legacy, they scratched a couple words on the base of a column. This is something a bored teenager would do. But wait a minute, here's the good stuff. Bam! What now, fool? This is from back in 2015. Ancient Hebrew inscriptions baffle archaeologists. Notice how they have ancient Hebrew inscriptions in quotes. We'll get to that. These writings were found on the walls of an ancient ritual bath or a mikveh. But here's the deal, is every ancient city had these bathhouses of one sort or another. So you can call it whatever you want, but it's just a bath. Experts are now trying to decipher words and symbols, including a boat and palm trees. They say the markings may be graffiti or have some religious significance. One of the symbols could be a menorah, and some of the inscriptions might indicate names. The letters that they're trying to decipher are in Aramaic, the common language spoken in the time of Jesus, and a series of symbols either smeared on with mud or cut into plaster. We're literally talking about bathroom graffiti here. And that's the best y'all can do? Well, yes, it actually is. Such a concentration of inscriptions and symbols from the Second Temple period at one archaeological site and in such a state of preservation is rare and unique and most intriguing. So they're literally saying that this little bit of bathroom graffiti is the highest concentration of inscriptions and symbols found in this entire area. And here's the deal, the symbols that they can decipher are in Aramaic, which can be written in a Hebrew script. They share some characters and whatnot, but for all I know, it's a pidgin language, which is where two languages kind of mix together like Creole, because two different groups are living together and interacting. But Aramaic is used by the Assyrian, Babylonian, and Persian empires. So this is a language that is spoke throughout the whole region, and the best they've got here is some bathhouse graffiti. Look, I don't have enough evidence one way or another to say whether this is the actual ancient Yeezy. I know some of you guys are more knowledgeable than me on this. There's been a lot of videos done about it. All I know is some of their proofs are flimsy at best. And one of these is that you've got the Gihon spring feeding the Siloam pool, the mikveh. And this is literally just a waterworks tunnel carrying water from a spring over to a pool. Well, pretty much every ancient city had infrastructure like this, especially in desert areas. But if you have a walled city, you have to have your own water supply in there. Otherwise, it's useless. Somebody can come and surround your city and you're only going to last a month. And really, there's no evidence that this is actually the Gihon spring that's mentioned in the Bible. It's just a spring. And then this inscription was allegedly found down in the tunnel. But now let's rewind to an important time for this region. The Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in 1946 out here in a cave in the middle of nowhere. And that's just 2 years before a really big event for this area. And you know, in the years leading up to this, they were trying to garner international support to legitimize their claim to this area, and they just happened to find the Dead Sea Scrolls. That was rather fortuitous timing on that discovery. Now, I heard a biblical scholar on Danny Jones say that the very first use of carbon dating was on the Dead Sea Scrolls, though all I've independently been able to verify is that it was definitely one of the earliest. And again, it's very fortuitous that this technology came into being at this time because it provided an indicative date range that largely confirmed the scrolls' ancient origin and eliminated theories linking them to the medieval period. So there were clearly scholars saying that, no, this is from the medieval period, and then carbon dating comes out and they say, no, that proves it. It's from ancient biblical days, which, not to get off in the timeline, but it's pretty much the same time. Plus, these are scrolls, so we don't know how long they've been sitting there. Drive out there, drop a couple pots in the corner of the cave, and then break out the photographs and document the discovery. And as far as finding some old scrolls, this language is considered sacred, therefore anything that you write in that language, you're not supposed to throw it away. So they have these repositories. There's one of these in Egypt with thousands of scrolls from the early AD era, and there's not one mention of Moses or Abraham or anything. Anyway, there's plenty of old scrolls in these repositories that might have found their way out to a cave. I went to snag this image, and the number one top comment was Ashley Bones. The noodle either sticks or it doesn't. Carbon dates are pure speculation and preference. And somehow always correspond to the suggested dating. So I just did a video a couple weeks ago about this underground complex that they're calling the House of Lehi. But just like everywhere in the area, all of the inscriptions there are in Greek. And we could spend all day going through the articles that I have saved with Greek writing and mosaic floors on everything in this area. Even boundary stones in Greek that are delineating that everything west of here pays taxes to King so-and-so, everything east of here pays to the other guy. All I'm saying is there's a lot of Greek all over the place here. The original Bible was written in Greek, which the Bible does specifically state the Greek Romans and the Greys both lived in the city, but the Greys were supposed to be running everything. Herod was king of the area, but he was still subservient to the Roman emperor or Antiochus, whoever. But there's just not a whole lot of hard evidence here that the Greys were running the show. It's usually a bunch of small coins that they find. And this one always cracked me up. I believe this is the one. It struck over a Roman coin because they wanted to commemorate the Bar Kokhba revolt for future generations. Just like in 1776, after the Boston Tea Party, the next thing the colonists did were strike coins to commemorate their battle against the English for future generations. Yeah, right. The thing is about historical events is you don't realize it's a historical event until after it's done with. But here, they knew it in the first year. So there's a lot of fishy stuff here. But if this wasn't the ancient holy city, then where could it have been? I've heard a lot of speculation on this, including California, Middle America, where the Mississippi is actually the Nile. Well, here's what Anatoly Fomenko writes on the subject. Let us discuss the identification of Yeezy as Troy and Constantinople made by our reconstructions. Now look, this is on page 600 of volume 4, and he's got all of these charts on how they duplicated kings and their reigns. But he's saying that one city was called by different people, different names. And basically all of our known history only goes back like 1200 years or something. But according to a popular medieval belief, the city of Yeezy was located, quote, at the center of the known world, which does not concur with the geographical location of the city we know today. Augustus had believed Judea to be the center of the earth. Moreover, Yeezy is located right at the crossroads of the east and the west, which puts it in the center of the world as we know it. This is what the Crusaders believed, according to a Byzantine historian. He had gone to the blessed land at the center of the earth, also known as Peastein, which is where the rivers of milk and honey run. It's hard to look at this landscape and think of anyone ever calling it the land of milk and honey. I understand that climates do change, but just picking a random spot outside of Constantinople, this looks a lot more like nice, fertile Midwest farmland, where there's plenty of rivers and good soil. We, meaning Fomenko and his team, are of the opinion that there is just one famous ancient city that fits this description, Constantinople, which is indeed located right at the center of the known world. Let's look at that on a map. Constantinople is right here and is basically the choke point where east meets west. You have to go 1,000 miles up and around to circumvent Constantinople. So important trade route, which made it very rich. And apparently the Byzantines lived there for 1,000 years with nothing to report about it. So these are some photos from around Constantinople in 1996. And Famiko says, a plaque on the wall near the entrance to the grave of Jesus on Golgotha. This is next to a symbolic grave, but the real one's supposed to be right behind it. And from Turkish, that translates as Saint Jesus, Saint Yusa. The roots of ecclesiastical history can be traced to the Balkans and to Asia Minor, an ancient region whose center had been in Yizi, also known as Troy, which eventually became known as Constantinople and later Istanbul. The area around Constantinople, or Yizi, had been known as Trode, Thracia, Khan's land, or Canaan. It is the birthplace of the ancient culture that later became Christianity. That's interesting that he referred to Canaan as Khan's land because the Khans basically ran the whole show up to the north. You've got literally thousands of miles of open plains where a bunch of guys on horseback are an unstoppable force. And they would come in and raid any settlements at their leisure, basically. The walls of Constantinople are legendary. And like I was saying earlier, there's springs in all these cities. There's several here. I think there's 3 main ones, but they call this one the life-giving spring, which fed an ancient pool of water. If one were so inclined, you could say that that's the Gihon spring, and this is the Siloam pool. Just saying, you can do that with pretty much anywhere. I've watched videos where they've mapped out all of the Book of Mormon across the United States. And any question about whether Joseph Smith was legit or not, Myth Vision has an exhaustive series on how the Book of Mormon came to be, and you just can't believe it's actually a thing when you hear all of it back to back. But I watched people take that description and they were able to apply it all across North America. So I don't think it's that hard to take an old text and match it to an area. I don't have my mind made up one way or another, but essentially they're just saying that Solomon's temple is underneath there. And, you know, they list that as Antonia Fortress right there, but some have suggested that that is Pontius Pilate's residency. So I don't know. There's a lot of things that match up with ancient texts, but I'm not sure that you couldn't do that with any city. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I'll catch you on the next one. Static out.